What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there this week, where we're talking running backs here for Week 8 Fantasy Football. At least we're trying to find enough healthy running backs to start here in Week 8 Fantasy Football, because, man, it's getting a little bit thin out there. Plus, we have some bye weeks to worry about, right? The Washington Football Team, Arizona Cardinals, Jacksonville Jaguars, and James Robinson not available this week. The Houston Texans, they're on a bye also. And the list of big-name injuries is just growing by the week. Does Christian McCaffrey return this week? What about Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon, Mark Ingram, Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones, Devonta Freeman? I mean, the list is huge of potential big-name guys that may not be available this week. It's something we really need to pay attention to. But in the meantime, we need to try to find some options to start here in our lineups this week. It's a little bit scary, but we're going to break down every matchup here in Week 8 and try to make those decisions a little bit easier for you. Try to give you as much information as possible so you can make the best decisions for your team. Now, before we get into Week 8, let's see how we did last week in Week 7. And overall, I'm pretty happy with the Week 7 performance here. We had 53 running backs we gave a start or sit designation to. Out of those 53 guys who completed their games this past week, 37 of them were correct for an accuracy percentage of 70%. Some of our biggest misses: Jeff Wilson Jr. When we did this show last week, it was unclear whether or not he would even be healthy enough to play. Well, he played for a little bit before he got hurt again, but he went off in that game. He was a miss. Leonard Fournette comes back from injury, automatically takes away the bulk of the touches from Ronald Jones, who had been performing pretty well the past few weeks. Leonard Fournette was a miss. Justin Jackson, he obviously was not 100%, and you could tell by the even split between him and Josh Kelly, he was a miss also. Some of the biggest hits: Todd Gurley went out and looked almost like vintage Todd Gurley for the most part. Helped a lot of people to some fantasy wins. Antonio Gibson, the breakout finally happened, right? What we really love to see there was the volume he got. And then DeAndre Swift. Don't like that he didn't get enough volume, but he did find the end zone, so that is definitely a plus and gave a solid return on investment there for DeAndre Swift. But what about for Week 8? Who are we starting and sitting? Let's kick it off right now with Thursday Night Football. And that's where we're going to find the Atlanta Falcons and Carolina Panthers, right? And for Todd Gurley, it's been great the past couple weeks as far as volume, right? He's had back-to-back games now of at least 23 touches. That's great since Dan Quinn has been fired. The problem is they haven't been efficient, at all. He's only averaging 2.55 yards per carry over his last 2 games. How inefficient is that? Even David Montgomery, the king of inefficiency, is averaging 1.2 yards per carry more than Todd Gurley over that span. So what that tells me is the volume is there. Great. It's inefficient, so we need some touchdowns. Cool. At least he's scoring touchdowns. He's got 7 of them on the season so far, and now we get some matchup once again against the Carolina Panthers. These two teams just faced off in Week 5. In that game, Todd Gurley had 150 total yards and a touchdown and was running back 2 on the week in fantasy football. The Panthers allow right around 24 fantasy points per game, 5th most in the NFL to opposing running backs. We're going to go ahead and keep Todd Gurley in the starting lineup. What about on the Carolina Panthers side of things, though? There's still a lot of questions surrounding Christian McCaffrey. Does he return or no? Right now, it kind of seems like a long shot, being that the game is on Thursday. If this was a Sunday game, I think the possibilities are a little bit greater, but it would not surprise me if they hold him off one more week. However, this is something we need to pay attention to. If he's a full-go in practice and in the starting lineup for the Carolina Panthers, he's back in your lineup for fantasy football. If he's not, and if he's limited, we go back to Mike Davis. But what has happened with Mike Davis here the past couple weeks? I mean, over the past 2 weeks, he's only averaging 3.5 receptions per game. The 4 weeks prior to that, he was averaging 7.5 receptions per game. Losing all that work in the passing game is really making his floor a lot lower and him a little bit more risky of a start. The Falcons do allow right around 17 fantasy points per game. We just need those receptions to return, because the last time these teams faced off in Week 5, Mike Davis also 149 total yards, 9 receptions, and a touchdown. That's what we need from Mike Davis this week if Christian McCaffrey sits. So throw him into your lineup if need be here on Thursday Night Football. Now we'll move over to the Sunday games. In the first game up, Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens. Always a fun game to watch. And there's no way that you're going to sit James Conner. Had a decent Week 7. Could have been a huge Week 7 though, right? He had a touchdown called back, dropped a touchdown, and then Benny Snell vultured one there inside the 10-yard line. It's just not what you like to see. However, the consistency is still there for James Conner. He's somebody who hasn't had less than 18 touches in a game since Week 1. Is the matchup this week ideal going up against the Baltimore Ravens? No, it's really not. The Ravens only allow right around 13.5 fantasy points per game. I'm not expecting a huge day from James Conner, but there's no way you can afford to sit him at a time like this either. Now for Baltimore, this backfield was confusing with 100% healthy Mark Ingram. Now, we don't know if Mark Ingram's fully healthy or not. And do we go with Gus Edwards or J.K. Dobbins? This is going to be a split no matter how you look at it, right? Gus Edwards getting the bulk of the carries on the ground if Ingram is out. J.K. Dobbins a little bit more involved in the passing game. Pittsburgh, though, is a very tough matchup. They only allow 13 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, which is third best in the NFL. If you want to take a stab at somebody, you're chasing the volume, it could be Gus Edwards if Mark Ingram is out. If Mark Ingram is active at 100% healthy, maybe he sees the bulk of the carries on the ground. The wild card here, J.K. Dobbins, more of a full PPR option. I would prefer to sit this entire backfield. Actually, best case scenario is if Mark Ingram sits, then I feel a little bit better about firing up Gus Edwards. J.K. Dobbins, just more of a deeper league flex, especially in PPR leagues at this point. Rams and Dolphins in this one, simple. Sean McVay hates your fantasy team. That's right, he doesn't want you to have nice things with Darrell Henderson. He would rather split touches with Malcolm Brown and make it almost impossible to figure out which one of these guys is going to have the better game on a weekly basis. It really comes down to touchdowns, right? And this is not the type of offense that's going to really utilize the running game to the point of seeing multiple touchdown opportunities each and every week. So if we only got one to play with, who's going to get it on a weekly basis? Neither one of them are involved in the passing game, so that kind of hurts a little bit also because there's no safe floor there. But this week, they get a matchup against the Miami Dolphins, who allow over 22 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, which is 8th most in the NFL. You have to take a gamble here because of the potential upside of this game, and I'm taking it with Darrell Henderson over Malcolm Brown this week. Now, the volume edge is, like I said, slightly in Henderson's favor, and that's what I'm banking on this week, is trying to get Darrell Henderson involved early, and if he can find the end zone, hopefully build off that momentum, keep the hot hand, and stay on the field. Now, for Miami, Myles Gaskin's been a pretty solid flex here majority of the season, right? But now, does that change with Tua under center? It's possible, right? It's not just going to be what it was before their bye week and with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now, typically, rookie quarterbacks like to lean on their running game a little bit more to take some of the pressure off. But the problem here is the opposing defense here in the Rams need to see that Tua can move the ball down the field. Otherwise, they're just going to stack the box and take away Gaskin. If Tua can open up the running game by completing passes down the field to his receivers like Devontae Parker, Preston Williams, that's only going to make things a little bit easier for Myles Gaskin here this week. The Rams only allow right around 14 fantasy points per game. 5th best in the NFL. It's a very difficult matchup, and I don't expect you have a lot of better options on your roster. I'll throw Gaskin into my flex, start him there, cross my fingers, and say a prayer to the fantasy gods, because this one, it's going to be a tough one. On to the Jets, Jets, and Kansas City Chiefs. And I'd like to thank those fantasy football gods for this matchup. Why? It's a Le'Veon Bell revenge game, a fresh revenge game for Le'Veon Bell now, right? And it would not surprise me to see both Lev Bell and CEH active heavily in this game. I have to think that Kansas City gets a lead early and really tries to hammer the run against the Jets, who allow right around 22 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, which is 9th most in the NFL. Plus, I would not put it past Andy Reid to let Lev Bell hammer the goal line this week and try to really stick it to New York. It's something that there's going to be a split. They're both going to see the field, but it would not surprise me if they both found the end zone and were both solid starts here in Week 8. For the Jets, it's going to be a split between Frank Gore and LaMichael Pirine, but they're going up against the Chiefs, so how much opportunity all game are they really going to have to run the ball between the tackles? Probably not a whole lot. Both these guys saw 11 carries on the ground last week. Pirine a little bit more active in the passing game. I don't want to start either one of these guys if I don't have to. If I have to take a stab at one, hopefully if it's like a half PPR or a full PPR, I'll take it with Pirine and hope that they're trailing the entire game and he gets a lot more checkdowns and garbage time points there just to give you that safer floor. Frank Gore just hasn't had a ceiling all season and not somebody who I feel comfortable starting on a weekly basis. I can see him probably turn a little bit more towards the rookie and Pirine to see what they have, and it's going to happen here this week against the Kansas City Chiefs. on a Minnesota and Green Bay, and for some reason I just feel like 2020 wants to stick it to us a little bit and make this the matchup of Alexander Mattison and Jamal Williams, even though we all would prefer Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones. These two teams just faced off week 1. Both those starting running backs finished inside the top 12 overall in fantasy football, but there's a chance they don't play, right? These are two names we need to pay close attention to all throughout the week. If either one of them sit, then yes, their backups, Alexander Mattison or Jamal Williams, are going to be starts. However, if Aaron Jones or Dalvin Cook are active, more than likely I'm not going to start either one of those backups. It's just too much of a risk unless you have no other options. The problem with that is you kind of take away the ceiling and you're just hoping for a safe floor that week. That's not what we're trying to do. It really depends on the makeup of your team because both of these teams allow right around 19 fantasy points per game, and for the most part, their teams are really reliant on one running back at a time. Now, at times, Green Bay has had Jamal Williams out there maybe a little bit too much, and maybe we don't want to see him as much when Aaron Jones is healthy, but for the most part, they give their lead back the opportunity at all the scoring opportunities and at least the bulk of the carries. That's what you're looking for. Now, if for some reason you're in a league where Alexander Mattison or Jamal Williams is available, which if you are, you're in too small of a league or somebody's not paying attention, but grab them because there is a chance that they could play this weekend. And if they do, they're in a good spot to put up a solid day here once again. But like I said, we need to pay attention to the injury reports, the practice reports, and the later week injury show that we do here with Dr. Ethan Turner to see the status on Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones before we make these, for sure sets to our lineup. It's just one of those things where in a year like we've had this year, we're going to have to be a little bit patient with our stud running backs here from this game. Colts and Lions up next in the battle of two rookies, right? Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift. Now, if you've watched this channel throughout the offseason, we talked about Jonathan Taylor a lot, and we said that, we expect him to struggle out of the gate. Maybe by mid-season, after the bye week or so, he could really start to take over this job and really run away with it and help a lot of people down the stretch. Now, obviously, we didn't see the injury to Marlon Mack as early as it happened, but this is about the time of the year that we expected Jonathan Taylor to turn that corner a little bit and really start producing. I'm not going to change my mind on that now. Coming off the bye week, I'm going to make Jonathan Taylor my Manscaped start of the week this week. Just a reminder, after this video, head over to manscaped.com. Anything you purchase, use the promo code HEADLINERS, all caps at checkout. We'll give you 20% off and free shipping. Head over there after this video. But like I said, now we get some matchup going up against the Detroit Lions, who allow right around 25 fantasy points per game. And really the reason I think they lean on Jonathan Taylor a little bit more here down the stretch is Phillip Rivers, right? He's inconsistently not able to move the ball down the field. It's really turned into a headache in the passing game. It's very hit or miss. The offensive line is still great in Indianapolis, and Jonathan Taylor is somebody who can go out there and handle a huge workload. Do not be surprised if we see this guy getting 18 to 20 touches this week and finding the end zone. Jonathan Taylor is going to be my start of the week here this week. Now for Detroit, Matt Patricia is doing his best to try to screw this up for a lot of people, right? Because Adrian Peterson still out-carried DeAndre Swift last week, 11-9. The benefit for us is DeAndre Swift got the touchdown and the better fantasy day overall. Now a matchup against the Indianapolis Colts, who only allow 14 fantasy points per game, which is 8th best in the NFL. I mean, we have a split backfield in a very tough matchup in a below-average overall running game. I would prefer to not play anybody in this backfield, to be completely honest, but the upside is still there for DeAndre Swift. And when in doubt, you go for the more explosive guy who's, getting more work in the passing game because that's that safer floor we're looking for. So this week, if I'm going to take a gamble, it's going to be on DeAndre Swift once again. Move on to the Raiders and Browns, and a slightly better matchup this week for Josh Jacobs. I mean, he was held in check for the most part last week by Tampa Bay, but let's give Tampa Bay some credit, right? That run defense is really, really good in Tampa Bay. How good are they? Well, they've only allowed one running back on the season so far to pass 29 yards rushing total. It's an elite defense, so I'm not going to hold too much against Josh Jacobs in that 1 week. A week in which he saw a season low in touches with only 13, but that's because they were trailing and not able to run the ball. One thing that was a positive, though, is Josh Jacobs led all running backs in targets with only 4. But still, it's not like, Jalen Richard or Devontae Booker were out there taking all the passing work. It was still Josh Jacobs involved. Now, Cleveland does allow right around 17 fantasy points per game. It's a better opportunity, and I'm going to put Josh Jacobs right back into the starting lineup. For Cleveland, You don't ever sit Kareem Hunt right now, right? He's currently running back 6 overall, averaging right around 15 fantasy points per game. And the Raiders allow 25 fantasy points per game, which is third most in the NFL. With Odell Beckham now hurt, how much more Kareem Hunt do we see? Possibly a slight uptick in his passing usage also, which is something to pay attention to. I wanted to make him my Manscaped star of the week, but it's kind of a little bit too obvious. So I went ahead and gave it to Jonathan Taylor instead. But Kareem Hunt is definitely somebody who's in line for a huge week here in Week 8. On to the Titans and Bengals, and I hate to say it. I mean, this is tough to say, but this may be the week that we have to sit Derrick Henry. No, we're not sitting Derrick Henry. I just want to make sure you're alert and paying attention out there because you never, ever sit Derrick Henry. Why? Well, he's the NFL rushing leader. He's the number 2 running back in fantasy football. Hasn't had a game yet with less than 20 touches, and he's going up against the Bengals, who allow 19.5 fantasy points per game. Yeah, you're starting King Henry, but what about for Cincinnati and Joe Mixon? Does he come back? He was a late week scratch last week, and in this show last week, I came out and said I wasn't overly high on Gio. I didn't see the high ceiling potential there for him in that matchup last week. But by the time the live show came around on Saturday and we saw how many other options had fallen off throughout the week, we had to tell everybody, yeah, Gio is a start now because he's just got that safer floor. But we kind of saw why we didn't like him to begin with, right? Last week only averaged 2.8 yards per carry in that game. The reason that he had a solid game is he was saved late by a touchdown. Had he not gotten that touchdown, a lot of people are going to be upset with the production of one Gio Bernard. He's just not one of those guys that's a workhorse type of guy. Whenever he gets that lead call, when Joe Mixon is down, he's heavily involved in the passing game. He's not going to get you those safe floor points by running between the tackles. It's just not the type of running back that he is. So this week, kind of the same thing, right? We need to monitor Joe Mixon. If Joe Mixon is healthy enough and practicing and playing, he goes into the starting lineup. If he's limited or he's out, then Gio Bernard goes into the starting lineup more as a flex play. Just don't expect huge numbers. He's going to remain dependent on the passing work and the touchdowns. If he doesn't get it, you're going to be disappointed. However, with the way that his usage has gone, not only last week, but in years past, he becomes a safer start. He's just not somebody who is a home run, slam dunk, top 10 running back option on a weekly basis if Joe Mixon sits. He just doesn't have that safety between the tackles. So, like I said, pay attention here throughout the week. What happens with Joe Mixon? How much is he limited? If he's going to be a full go, Gio Bernard goes back on the bench, back on waivers. If Mixon's going to be limited or out, all of a sudden Gio becomes that option. On to the divisional matchup, Patriots and Bills now, and typically I would want to start a running back against the Buffalo Bills, but New England, that backfield is a total mess, and with Cam Newton under center, which it sounds like he will be, the running game is basically just dead in New England. Now, Damian Harris, he looks good. The problem is he just doesn't see consistent enough volume because Cam likes to call Cam's number. Plus, New England doesn't have as many leads this year as in years past, and it's really taking away their opportunities to really run the ball a lot. Now, do not be surprised if in the near future New England just starts to rebuild, right? I'm hearing rumors that Stephon Gilmore could be on the trading block, and if that's the case, they're in full rebuild mode. They realize that Cam Newton is not the future, and they got to make a move now to try to start the process of rebuilding the core of this franchise. It's kind of hard to see, but we've seen them be so good for so long that it's their turn, right? Other teams have suffered for a long time and starting to get better. But Buffalo does allow right around 19 fantasy points per game. I just can't trust this backfield in New England. I wouldn't start any one of them this week and really feel comfortable with it. That even goes for James White, whose usage is also a hit and miss. For Buffalo, you got Zach Moss back, right? And he's creating a split with Devin Singletary. Doesn't worry me too much because Zach Moss, I'm sure, will be hurt again in a week or so. That's just kind of what he does. But Devin Singletary, who we kind of like to refer to as Damn It Devin, is still underwhelming, right? He's getting okay volume. He's just not doing a whole lot with it. But this matchup isn't horrible. New England's allowing right around 20 fantasy points per game on the ground to opposing running backs, which is 10th most in the NFL. Honestly, though, I would prefer to sit both of these guys. With the lack of options that you have, I still may lean Devin Singletary in a matchup like this in hopes that they can continue to get him involved. I just don't see enough on film of Zach Moss to really want to trust him throwing him into a starting lineup here as of right now here in Week 8. Chargers and Broncos, and a couple of backfields here with a couple of options, right? The first one there in Denver We really need to monitor the status of Phillip Lindsay. He had a concussion last week, and if he's cleared, he's somebody who I really like this week 100%. And why? It's because he looked way better than Melvin Gordon on the field this past week once again. 9 carries for 79 yards against Kansas City before the concussion. Plus, Melvin Gordon's got a fumbling issue. A WTF stat of the day here. Did you know that Phillip Lindsay has yet to fumble the ball as a member of the Denver Broncos? That is insane. It's over 500 carries. The guy even dresses his son in a football outfit so he knows not to drop. I mean, it's legit there, right? Phillip Lindsay is a great story, and as of right now, is the better back in this backfield. If he is healthy, he is a must start for me here this week. I like Phillip Lindsay quite a bit. Melvin Gordon and his fumbling issue. If Lindsay comes out and is healthy and is playing great, do not be surprised if it cuts into the carries of Melvin Gordon, making him a little bit more of a flex option at best this week. I can see him possibly finishing outside the top 24. He's going to be a lot more goal line dependent, trying to punch him in there at the goal line over Phillip Lindsay to really give you a great fantasy day. And like I said, right now with the Chargers allowing right around 17 fantasy points per game, I feel a lot more comfortable starting Phillip Lindsay than I do starting Melvin Gordon. But with the lack of options in the bye weeks this week, I don't know if you can really afford to sit either one. On the Chargers side of things, we have a pretty even split between Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly. Jackson doesn't look 100% healthy either, right? He's been dealing with a knee issue we knew last week, and it really seemed to bother him there at times in Week 7. Now they get a matchup going up against the Denver Broncos, the number 2 running defense against opposing running backs in fantasy football. They only give up 12.9 fantasy points per game. Plus, Justin Herbert is an amazing quarterback, and he looks great on the field throwing the ball down the field. He's there to throw the ball, and they're doing it very well, and it's kind of taken away some of the ceiling from the running game. So I would prefer to sit both of these guys right now. I think Joshua Kelly may be slightly safer if you're looking for a starting option, but he's not a must start by any means. This really is one of those potentials where you need to look at your team, look at the options you have, and be like, listen, either I need to take a gamble with one of these guys, or I have better options, because I don't love the matchup and I don't love the split here this week for either one of the running backs for the Los Angeles Chargers. Niners and Seahawks in a battle of two teams who saw their starting running backs get injured in Week 7. For the Niners, it was Jeff Wilson, right? He was having a huge game before he went down with an injury, and now it seems like it's JaMycal Hasty season in San Francisco, and he's done just fine with his opportunities, averaging right around 5.2 yards per carry, and Jerick McKinnon in the running game is basically non-existent. Maybe he sees a few more options in the passing game with Deebo Samuel out, but that's something to really pay attention to here as the week progresses, because it seems like they're going to go forward JaMycal Hasty and see what the young kid has. And in a Kyle Shanahan offense, an offense that's so creative that gets their players in positions to succeed, in my opinion, it's a risk, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. I'll start JaMycal Hasty this week against the Seahawks, who allow just over 16 fantasy points per game. Now in Seattle, we saw Chris Carson go down with a foot sprain. We see Carlos Hyde dealing with a hamstring issue. We see Travis Homer dealing with a knee contusion. That leaves fourth-string running back DJ Dallas as the potential starter in Seattle here for Week 8. Congratulations, DJ. You get the San Francisco 49ers, the number 1 defense in the NFL, against opposing running backs, giving up only on average 12.7 fantasy points per game. However, if these other options ahead of him, Carson, Hyde, and Homer, if they sit, the volume is going to be there, and that makes him a flex option. Now, if we head into the weekend and some of these other options are available, it's something we need to kind of reconsider, and that's something we'll update you on not only the running back rankings, but on our live show on Saturday, so make sure you tune into that so we can kind of better understand this backfield and where it may go here this weekend. Saints and Bears, and is this matchup ideal for Alvin Kamara? No, it's not. The Bears only allow 14.5 fantasy points per game, which is 5th best in the NFL to opposing running backs, but it does not matter. You start Alvin Kamara. He's finished inside the top 10 5 out of 6 weeks that he's played so far here this season, and he's seen at least 8+ targets in every game except for Week 4. You never sit Alvin Kamara. I don't care who he's playing. As for Chicago, the David Montgomery struggles continue, right? He just continues to underwhelm on a weekly basis. Only has 1 rushing touchdown on the season and is averaging 3.7 yards per carry. What's weird to me is they really don't seem to utilize him in the passing game until late in the game. I'm talking like fourth quarter garbage points. That's when we all of a sudden start to see a lot more David Montgomery. It's like they kind of just nickel and dime him all game, and the fourth quarter comes along, and then all of a sudden he gets all of his touches and opportunities. To me, that doesn't make sense. He's somebody that should get involved all four quarters. That would definitely raise the floor for him. He's not somebody who sees consistent passing work early in the games. The usage to me just makes no sense. I don't know if you can afford to sit David Montgomery given all the injuries and bye weeks. I would prefer to, going up against the Saints. They're top 10 against opposing running backs, allowing right around 15 fantasy points per game. But given the options and the injuries, I think you're stuck kind of starting David Montgomery. I'm just lowering expectations and expecting more of a top 25 finish other than anywhere near the top 12. Cowboys and Eagles, and all Zeke owners need a brown paper bag, right? Either to breathe in and out of or to drink something out of it at this point, because back-to-back duds has really hurt their fantasy football teams. I mean, he's fumbling the ball. He's seen less volume, not finding the end zone. Bad quarterback play isn't helping. And now he gets a matchup with the Eagles, who allow right around 16 fantasy points per game. You can't afford to sit Zeke Elliott, but it does not look good in Dallas here remainder of the season. The bad quarterback play is just forcing defenses to focus on Zeke, and it's really making him inefficient. But you can't afford to sit him here at this point. For Philadelphia, what's the chances we get Miles Sanders back? Probably 50-50, right? The initial report said 1 to 2 weeks. It's been a week. We would like to have him back, but one thing is for sure. Whether it's Miles Sanders or it's Boston Scott, whoever the starting running back is this week for the Philadelphia Eagles, you're going to start them against the Dallas Cowboys because their defense blows. How bad? They allow just about 23 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, and the passing options here with Boston Scott, the efficiency that we saw with Miles Sanders before he went down are going to be make them absolute must-starts here in Week 8 against the Dallas Cowboys. That leaves us Monday Night Football, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, New York Giants, and I knew it. I told you last week, you cannot rely on Bruce Arians for being committed to a running back no matter what, right? How was Ronald Jones rewarded with 3 straight 100-yard games? He was out-touched by Leonard Fournette in his first game back 17-14, and all it took for him to lose that work was 1 dropped pass. We talked about this exact scenario just last week in this show, right? As soon as Rojo, falters or makes a mistake, it just opens the door for Leonard Fournette. And we just can't forget how good Leonard Fournette is. I know a lot of people hate Leonard Fournette out there, but when he's healthy, he's really good, and he's able to get work in the passing game. Just last week, 6 receptions for 47 yards, averaged 4.5 yards per carry. It's not like he's just some scrub on the bottom of the bench that they threw in there to punish Rojo. No, this guy is capable of being a lead back. Now, this split is going to continue, right? They're both going to see volume on a weekly basis. The good thing is this offense as a whole is looking a lot better, which could lead to more late game leads and more running in Tampa Bay. Both of these guys going forward, as long as they're healthy, are going to be flex starts on a weekly basis just due to the offense that they're in and the potential to share load. Plus, they should both see opportunities to find the end zone. It's just going to be a headache because not one of them is going to be the lead guy again unless somebody gets hurt. More of a hot hand approach on a weekly basis. For the Giants, nope. I mean, Devonta Freeman, he's not 100% healthy. They're going against Tampa Bay, who allows 14 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, 7th best in the NFL. And we just talked about this defense earlier, how they've only allowed 1 running back on the season to rush for more than 29 yards in a game. I'm not going to risk it with anybody there in New York here this week. All right, those are my starts and sits for the running back position here, Week 8 fantasy football. But I do want to stress the importance of staying tuned throughout the week, right? If you followed the NFL for any length of time, you know things change frequently. In fact, NFL stands for not for long because things change so quickly, it's really hard to stay on top of. Don't just make this the one video you watch all week and then make your decisions solely off this video. If there's updates, we'll put them in the rankings videos. We'll talk about them on the Saturday night live streams and answering people's questions. We do them for like 2.5 hours every Saturday evening, trying to give out the most up-to-date information that we possibly can. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you are updated all throughout the week and can make the best choices for your fantasy teams. But we greatly appreciate the support. The channel continues to grow, and we look forward to talking to you guys on a weekly basis. Hopefully you have a great week, and we'll talk to you later.